Hey everyone, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and today we're going to talk about the VelocityOne Flightstick. This is a $130 flight sim stick that works on PC and Xbox. It doesn't have any rudder pedals or anything, but it's not priced to. It's $130, so something has to give, and I will talk about how this compares to the VelocityOne Flight that does come with the yoke and rudder pedals. I reviewed that in the past. And then hopefully by the end of the review, you decide if you want something like this or not. I'm not a hardcore flight sim. If you know my channel, I'm more of an audio gamer type guy. And I've reviewed a lot of Turtle Beach stuff in the past, and I do like this stuff. I used to be much more into the flight sim stuff like back in the day when I was younger, but it's been a while. So I'm going to share my experiences as more of a general consumer and gamer who's getting into this stuff, but not someone who has a lot of equipment and a dedicated rig, because I think it's two different customer bases. So if you're looking to just get into it, then hopefully this review helps you understand some of the things you can expect and look for. Now, this product was sent to me for review, so huge thanks to Turtle Beach for that. It won't affect what I say about it, but I just always want to be honest and open with everyone. So with that being said, I will have generic links in the description below. It's generic Amazon link. Supports the channel, but by all means purchase it wherever you want. I will say when it comes to peripherals and stuff like this, always purchase it from a reputable place. Make sure you have a warranty. Make sure that in the first couple weeks, if you don't like it, you can always return it, and that way you're protected. So I'm going to start with very, very basic stuff in terms of what comes in the box. You get a quick start guide, a little manual, this nice long USB-A to C cable, and some hardware screws. So I want to show you the layout. Now this has 3 USB-C ports on the back. One of them, the one all the way to the left, is for your PC or Xbox connection, and the other 2 are additional ports. Now they're USB-C and they are a bit recessed, so the only thing I'm not crazy about there is certain cables may not plug in correctly. So especially on the Xbox side, there aren't really a lot of USB-C peripherals that you can use. So just treat this as like a small USB-C cable hub for your desk. Now this could obviously be used for future expansion, so maybe that's designed with the intent of, you know, if they sell a different dedicated throttle quadrant or rudder pedals, things like that, maybe there'll be expansions down the road and they're planning for it. But in the meantime, in PC mode, you can use that as a USB hub. If you turn this upside down, you will see the 3 mounting screws. And I think they are beneficial if you can get away with them. Obviously, if you're getting a $130 flight stick, you may not have a dedicated flight sim rig. So I want to talk about the stiffness of this because it's fairly lightweight. The base is light. I think more of the weight is actually, at least it feels like it's in the stick, because this stick feels incredibly premium. It's a soft touch rubber, feels really good in hand. The spring system on the joystick is rather stiff. So if you are delicately pushing, you can see that I'm moving the entire base off the platform because there isn't a lot of base, a lot of weight to the base, and it's not really wide. Resting your hand on it in a natural way, I can easily go back and forth. However, in sweaty situations, because I did a mix of flight sim and I did some PvP stuff like War Thunder, sometimes you will have this move a little bit extra. And I found that when I really got into the moment, I kind of kept my hand on the base. So I can, I guess, I don't know if I look like a noob doing that or something, but when I get intense, I tend to move the base just a little bit. So perhaps the mounting screws will help, even if you find a simple system to attach it to. I just want to point out how you can set it up. Now, this is an ambidextrous stick, and what's really cool about that is this little hand rest here. So not only can you change the height, if you can see the screws on the back of the stick, you can actually flip the rest over on the other side. So all I have to do is undo this screw. Let's do that on the camera so you can see how relatively straightforward it is. Once you do that, you can just wiggle this out. I'll turn it on this side. Let's go back and pick a screw hole here. You basically just line up the tabs, and depending on, you know, the way, you know, which side you're putting on, you want the rest to tilt down a little bit, and screwing this in will secure it, and that'll be good to go for lefties. So now that I'm done flipping the hand rest over, I'm good to go on the left side, and because this is a symmetrical design, I can use the throttles on either side, and then even the button layout is the same. You have a slightly different labeling system. You know, they both say B1, B5, for example, in a symmetric way, and then the A is smaller on the right than it is the left. You can still assign these 8 buttons to perform independently. It's not like this is the exact same mapping on this side. So they just do it to keep things symmetrical from the way it looks, but from a function standpoint, you still get to use them all independently. Now, what's really cool is some of the built-in settings and this little wheel. This wheel is used for settings, and you can basically think of the right side as an enter button. You can see this little check mark here, and the left side is a back button. You can see the back button there. All I have to do is tap it. And once it's plugged in, I can basically rotate through the wheel. This is where you can change your PC to Xbox input. You can change your joystick sensitivity. You can change the color scheme on it, even audio settings, because if you look at the front of the unit, there is a TRRS combo jack. So basically I can plug any wired gaming headset, whether it's a Recon headset or whatever you're using, you can plug that into the front of this and actually adjust the game volume. What was really funny is just like the Recon controllers from Turtle Beach, they actually have game audio presets built in, including their signature sound, bass boost, bass and treble, vocal, superhuman hearing, and on Xbox mode, you actually still have game to chat mix, which you can control through this ring on the screen, which is really nifty. So if you are playing on Xbox, I love that feature. That's probably one of the standout things to me on the Xbox side. Now the quick start guide is a pretty handy thing to have. It gives you some basics as far as setup go, and when you open the page, it actually gives you some suggested button mappings. I think this is like a good rule of thumb of where to start, but not necessarily what might be right for you or the game or software you're playing. So I found that for on the Microsoft Flight Simulator side, I had some issues with the free to look settings on my right hat. So I can talk about that briefly in a minute. But I made some changes to make sure the stick performed with how I would want to use it and not so much what the defaults are. Once I made some changes, I enjoyed it much more. And when I played War of Thunder, I did a lot more manual button mapping. I basically went through the custom setup guide because there's no profile on War Thunder for the flight stick, of course. It's an older game now. So I had to do everything manually. So keep that in mind. This is a general rule of thumb, but not the only way you can have it configured. With that being said, let's talk about setup. Now, as far as setup goes, it's pretty painless. I talked about some basic customization stuff, but as far as out of the box, I didn't have to install any special drivers or software. It was fully plug and play. That included playing Flight Simulator on Xbox and PC, and that also included playing War Thunder on Steam. I had no issues setting it up. I did have to go through the manual setup, of course, on War Thunder. It's an older game. There's no profile detected for this, so I had to basically go through the entire custom setup to configure it to my liking, and once I did that, I found it much more enjoyable. Now, if you are doing firmware updates, you can do it on PC, but you want to actually set the flight stick in Xbox mode, which is an interesting requirement, but it wouldn't update the firmware in PC mode. I had to set it to Xbox, and then everything was good to go. And on the Bluetooth app, it even showed firmware status in settings. So I mentioned Bluetooth. There's actually a pretty handy app that you can use on your phone to adjust settings on the fly. It makes it incredibly convenient, and the adjustments can happen in as little as 1 to 2 seconds because it's using a Bluetooth connection to this. This is where the flight stick is a pretty interesting unit because it's $130, but it has a pretty good audio mixer built in. So if you are gaming on it, let's be real, some people are going to plug a headset into this. They have a fairly robust feature set there. You have a lot of controls. It's built really, really solid. And the fact that you can customize things via Bluetooth on the fly makes life so much easier to set up. It really is a joy because you don't have to deal with fumbling around through this wheel if you don't want to. Maybe you're in the middle of the game and you want to switch your joystick to precision mode because you just found that the standard profile wasn't to your liking. Well, instead of wasting time, just pull it up on your phone, make a quick switch, and now you're back to playing. Now, when the flight stick is in PC mode, this little red bullseye button right here is also a touchpad to mimic mouse movement. I did increase the sensitivity on mine because I found that with I play on 27-inch 4K monitors, and with that resolution, it takes like 5 swipes to get across the screen. So I increased the sensitivity to speed that up a little bit, but it comes in handy. It's not going to replace your mouse, but for quick navigation, or especially when you're like inside a plane on Flight Sim, and you want to look around with the right hat and then click on things, you can use this to do like that fine-tune motion or interactions with all the stuff inside the plane instead of just relying on button mappings. It became incredibly handy for Flight Sim. Now, I mentioned some of the other controls already, so I'm not going to spend too much time down here, but I did want to talk about the hats. The left hat is very tactile. It has a nice solid click to it, so you shouldn't be accidentally pressing anything. It does not press in to serve as an additional button. The right hat does press in, and it has more of a tiny joystick movement. Again, fairly sensitive, but you can reassign this to do different things. So depending on what requirement you have, you can adjust there. The trim wheel is fairly sensitive as well. Again, a lot of these things are just a little bit hypersensitive. If you want kind of like the low and slow approach, you will likely have to dial some of these settings down. I found that lowering the trim wheel sensitivity helped for flight sim, but wasn't so much an issue if you're playing the PvP game, of course. I'm typically using the stick for most of my flight control anyway. Now, I like the way the flight stick felt in my hand, and I liked how the trigger felt. It's a pretty good size. Right now, this isn't really set up perfectly for my hand. I have to lower it one, and I'm a righty. However, the soft rubber grip mixed with the trigger feel and how solid this feels, it feels like a premium experience. You know, the stuff that your hands interact with the most is done right. Naturally, you have rudder control here. You can digitally lock that out, so if you have rudder pedals or if you just don't want to use the rotation of the flight stick to control rudder, you can disable that through the screen and through the Bluetooth app as well. All right, so when it comes to actually playing on this is where I have to be completely transparent. I'm not a pro flight sim person. I respect a lot of people who have that discipline and can really understand all of that. I frankly don't have the time to get into it to that level. But it doesn't mean I don't want a more immersive, fun experience when I do play. So naturally, when I got the flight stick, the first thing I thought of was, hey, I remember the Top Gun flight experience on Flight Simulator, and I purposely did not try it until I had time to play it on this. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, obviously doing barrel rolls, doing low altitude flyovers on mountains and stuff like that, it's been a blast. Now, piloting an F-18 with the flight stick on Flight Simulator, it showed something rather quickly, and that's how sensitive this is or was out of the box. I admittedly kind of just did plug and play. I did some generic button assignments, and I wanted to make sure I can at least control the plane, of course, but I was just really excited to try it out. And I found that some of the adjustments, again, I mentioned the trim wheel, even the rudder control, it was just a little bit sensitive, and you can get better at it through time by getting used to it. Lower sensitivity maybe, but I found that because of how stiff the joystick spring is, it takes a little bit to get used to when you're transitioning from left to right. You can see that when I'm trying to move slowly, it's always going to be that notch in the middle. I can't gradually or smoothly transition left to right. There is a fairly strong catch, and you can see just how stiff that spring is. It doesn't flop around too much because of the way it's sprung, and it has a fairly strong center. Now, you can change dead zones with a lot of these things, especially important with the hat, like the H2. Increasing the dead zone, I think, helped a lot for me for changing my views. It was just a mix. It was a mix of a learning curve. It was a mix of adjusting settings. And it gets to a point where there is a physical limitation to what this can do at this price range because it's fairly stiffly sprung. When I got into PvP, like I said, I think the most noticeable thing is just like when you're playing on a controller, you're in a tense fighting situation, you clench the controller a little bit more hard, and you might do accidental button presses from time to time. Well, when I'm playing PvP and I'm trying to not get shot at, I'm going to do some aggressive maneuvers, at least what I think is aggressive, evasive maneuvers. And I found that sometimes, I did this, and I could feel it move, and you lose kind of that hard stop of where the joystick is basically bottoming out or hitting your max limits. So I ended up just keeping my hand on the base more often than not. I think if you can secure it to something, it'll help. And again, the rest of the controls all work great. I had no problems with this stuff down here. Even the throttle adjustment was relatively straightforward. I had no issues where it kind of became, I don't want to say out of alignment, but the dead zone triggered at 1 or 2%, for example. It didn't ever cause issues in that regard. It was pretty consistent. I think the biggest thing for me is, when I try to pitch the plane vertically, I had to be really careful not to do any rudder activation because, again, it was a little bit sensitive. And my trim needed more adjustment than expected. However, on PvP, it's fun. And at $130, we have to set realistic expectations on how much you can get out of a product that's offering those level of features. It didn't make me Maverick. I wasn't a Top Gun pilot when I was playing PvP. But I had more fun playing PvP with something like this than using either, of course, an Xbox controller or a mouse and keyboard setup. This was just a lot more immersive. It makes you feel more in it. You can focus more on the game. And I just love even just the gunfire, switching your thumb left and right for light and heavy munitions or bomb drops, and squeezing this when you're in a dogfight and using the trigger. It was just a lot of fun. And I think for my experience, that was the most important thing. As long as you held the base down and there wasn't much movement, that was the only gripe I had, is I felt the stick was a little bit stiff, but overall, the rest of the feature set made it a pretty fun experience. Honestly, from how this spec'd out, how I got to set it up, all the features it had, I expected the flight stick to be closer to like 180 to 200 just because of all the stuff it offers. It has the RGB. You can adjust to different color profiles. No custom RGB, but you can at least toggle through some presets. The audio mixer, the ability to control it via Bluetooth on your phone to customize it. So it's a pretty well packaged unit. It's not executing everything perfectly, but I think at 130, it does a pretty damn good job. And the most important thing for me was I had fun playing on it. So anyway, with that being said, that wraps up the review. I hope you found it helpful and learned something new about something kind of fun and different than what I normally cover. So with that being said, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to see you in a future video, and I will see you next time. Bye.